This eerie story took place in mid-2021. A young woman went on her first date with a guy to the movies, but the evening turned into a tragedy. Although the case was solved fairly quickly, it still contains many strange and shocking moments. Today, we will tell you what happened to Rylee Goodrich and Anthony Barajas. Rylee Goodrich was born and raised in the American city of Corona, California. In school, she played volleyball and was part of the cheerleading team. She had many friends who described her as a positive, outgoing, and fun-loving girl with a big heart. After graduating from high school, Rylee received a scholarship to Grand Canyon University in Arizona. On July 4th, Independence Day in the U.S., her friends threw a big party. There, Rylee met a young man named Anthony Barajas, who was a year older than her. They quickly developed a mutual attraction and continued to stay in touch in the following days. Unexpectedly, Anthony became popular on social media. In 2019, he created an account where he posted various humorous videos. At some point, his videos began to attract a wide audience, and by the summer of 2021, he had nearly 1 million followers. After chatting for a while on social media, the two decided to go on their first date. However, it was important to Rylee that her father, Dave, approve of her choice. Despite already being 18 at the time, Rylee was very close to her parents and wanted them to meet Anthony first. On July 26th, Rylee and Anthony decided to meet and go to a late-night movie, choosing the film The Forever Purge. The plot of the film revolves around the idea that in the United States, all crimes are legalized for 12 hours each year. Who could have imagined how eerily this choice of movie would turn out to be? Their movie session started at 9:30 p.m. and ended close to midnight. Since it was a weekday, there weren't many people in the theater. During the movie, Rylee texted her mother, saying that she found the movie boring but was still enjoying the date with Anthony. That was the last time anyone heard from her. When the movie ended, a theater employee went into the auditorium to clean up. To his surprise, he found Rylee and Anthony still there. From a distance, it seemed like they were just sitting or sleeping in their seats. But after taking a few steps closer, he was horrified to discover that both were seriously injured and unconscious. After calling 911, police and paramedics arrived at the scene. The medical team quickly determined that Rylee had already passed away, while Anthony was still alive but in critical condition and unconscious. He was rushed to a local hospital and put on life support while detectives began investigating the crime scene. Initially, it was difficult for them to understand what had happened in that auditorium. The only thing they quickly established was that both Rylee and Anthony had been shot in the head. There were no clues at the crime scene that could shed light on what had occurred. It was obviously futile for the detectives to lift fingerprints or search for DNA samples in the theater, so they pursued a different approach. This story quickly spread through the California media, and soon, across the entire country. The first step was to question the theater employees who were working that evening. It turned out that only 6 tickets had been sold for that session. This meant that the killer was likely one of the other 4 attendees. There was another puzzling aspect that confused not only the police, but also everyone who heard about the incident through the news. If the killer was one of the 6 viewers, how did the other 2 attendees not hear the gunshots? The only explanation at the time was that the other 2 viewers simply mistook the sounds of the gunshots for part of the movie. The film contained many violent scenes, including the use of firearms. It was possible that the killer fired during one of those scenes. However, this mystery was solved relatively quickly. Detectives discovered that out of all the tickets sold, 4 had been purchased by one person for himself and 3 friends. This led the police to consider the possibility that the crime could have been committed by a group of people. The investigation continued throughout the night, and the next day, the police announced the arrest of a suspect. The suspect turned out to be 20-year-old Joseph Jimenez. What's interesting is that a stroke of pure luck helped the police identify him. It turned out that Joseph himself called the police the day after the crime. However, he did not call to confess. At around 9:30 p.m., Joseph called 911 and reported that someone was chasing him. When the police arrived, they found him in the middle of the street holding a gun and took him into custody. They quickly realized that the attack in the movie theater had been carried out with a gun of the exact same caliber. They sent Joseph's gun to forensic experts. With 3 spent shell casings from the theater in hand, they confirmed that this was the weapon used in the crime. Although Jimenez denied any involvement in the crime, detectives quickly found another crucial piece of evidence. A search of the suspect's home led to the discovery of Rylee Goodrich's wallet. The police then tracked down the other 3 people who had attended that movie session. It turned out that they were all friends of Joseph, but their story shocked the detectives. According to his friends, none of them had any idea that a simple trip to the movies would end in such a tragedy. They were just sitting and watching the film, but during the session, they started noticing something strange. They said that Joseph suddenly began behaving very suspiciously. He was talking to himself and mumbling incomprehensible things. At one point, he mentioned that he needed to go to the restroom and left. However, instead of heading to the restroom, he went to his car. From there, he retrieved a gun and returned to the theater. Joseph's behavior strongly suggested that he was about to do something bad, but his friends chose to ignore the situation. They admitted that as soon as they heard the news about the crime, they immediately suspected Joseph. This alone was enough to arrest Jimenez on 3 charges: murder, attempted murder, and robbery. At that time, Anthony was still on life support, but ultimately, the doctors were unable to save him. On the evening of July 31st, he passed away without ever regaining consciousness. As a result, an additional charge was brought against Joseph, which could potentially lead to the death penalty. The situation was looking grim for Joseph Jimenez. With the evidence against him, it seemed almost certain that he would end up on death row. Apparently, he understood this well and decided to confess to the crime. However, his confession raised even more questions. Joseph revealed that 9 months earlier, he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, which he had been managing with medication. Shortly before the incident, he stopped taking his medication, and that's when he began hearing voices. At first, the voices told him that someone was going to steal his car and TV, and later, they even threatened to kill his entire family. That evening at the theater, Joseph once again began hearing voices, and this time, they ordered him to kill Rylee and Anthony. The voices threatened to execute his entire family if he refused. According to Jimenez, he tried to resist these voices, but ultimately gave in and committed the crime. In late September, the first court hearing took place, where Joseph pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. This didn't mean that he was denying his actions. Rather, it meant that the court now had to determine his mental competency. Jimenez stated that he would only plead guilty if he was found legally insane. The details of his mental state have not yet been disclosed. Regardless of the outcome, this case is deeply troubling in its injustice. Two innocent young people simply wanted to spend an evening at the movies, but ended up becoming victims of a completely random act of violence. The public and the media criticized the theater management for not screening Joseph upon entry, but is it fair to blame them? And that concludes our coverage of this tragic story. If you found this video informative or thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates on cases like these. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to share this video with your friends and give it a thumbs up if you found it valuable. Thank you for watching.